Many persons are now looking towards the elections,
right.
The current term where the Labour government nears expiration. In your mind, on what main issue will the upcoming polls be won or lost?
I think the issue is going to be on the credibility of the leadership of the respective parties. Which of the political parties will continue the economic recovery that's on the way? Which political party will continue to ensure that there's a downward movement in unemployment? Which political party will ensure that investment comes to this country? And which political party will look after the economic fundamentals of the country? So ultimately it's going to be the issue of the credibility of the leadership of the respective political parties. But I think also there's a deeper issue. The question will be which political party has the courage to bring about the necessary reforms in the health sector, because we have to transform the health sector. So I believe that that is going to be a major issue into the next general election. So ultimately it's going to be a test of credibility.
Okay, thank you. You stated that you are warming towards the idea of a fixed date for elections. Is that something you plan to pursue? And should the Labour Party win the next election?
No, I don't decide these matters on my own. I just expressed a personal view in that regard. Certainly I do think it's an issue we need to think about. But obviously, when our party gets down to finalizing our manifesto, we will then present our constitutional proposals. Because, as you know, in the sitting of the House, the last sitting of the House, when we considered the report on constitutional reform, we proposed, and the opposition accepted, a joint committee of members of the House to review the proposal. So I would imagine that the next term of office of any government elected by the people of St. Lucia would want to consider in detail the question of constitutional reform. So in effect, that may be part of the debate and discussion on constitutional reform.
The state of the economy has been a major has been a major issue for your critics. When it comes to that matter, looking back, what could you have done differently? Some may have suggested that VAT may have delayed the country's development. Looking back, what could you have done differently?
Well, I don't know how much the critics really have to say on the state of the economy. We now have an economy that's on the way to recovery. We now have an economy that is attracting investment, and not only from foreign investors, but from local investors. So I don't know what realistically can be said about the state of the economy, because I think we have surprised everybody by the ongoing turnaround in the economy. We're not out of the woods by any means. There are still difficult decisions to make, but certainly I would say that we now have an environment of confidence in the future of this economy, which is, I think, an important thing, because without confidence, an economy can't develop, it can't grow. That having been said, however, I think the reform to introduce VAT was absolutely necessary and vital. We had said in our manifesto that we would have introduced VAT. There was a clear commitment by the Labour Party that it had little alternative but to introduce VAT, but also to how much longer could St. Lucia have remained as a single country in the Eastern Caribbean without VAT. All other countries, including countries in CARICOM, had moved in the direction of VAT. And in fact, one of the countries that had not thought about VAT like we did, for example, Bahamas, just introduced VAT, so that it was an unstoppable march towards VAT. And it is true that the introduction of VAT caught us at a period when the economy of St. Lucia was in contraction. But at the same time, I think everybody understood that in a situation where the financial markets were difficult, that the countries of the Caribbean were not able to attract debt easily, that we badly needed revenue to pay for the cost of our social services, but also to meet increasingly the cost of the public service, because that's always an issue for us. So despite the fact that VAT was introduced in a period of economic downturn, we have seen the benefits. VAT is now settling exceedingly well. Revenue continues to be on the upward movement. But at the same time, that's not going to resolve our problems, because we have to consider other aspects of the economy, including, of course, investment. We can't solely rely on VAT. This economy has to grow. And that is the next mission of the government, to ensure that we continue on a growth path.
Okay. There have been suggestions that since the impact report was released, the zeal at which the police department pursued criminals has been reduced. What is your opinion?
I don't buy that argument, to be frank. Clearly, there are police officers who have been distracted by the impacts report, and it has presented challenges for the leadership of the police force to deal with the outcome of that report. And you have to bear in mind, too, that the police force is still, generally speaking, in the dark about the report because the report has not been made available. There's no disclosure of the report. But I would imagine that those who assume that they're affected by the report may be concerned, they may be overwhelmed. But I would say that there's a genuine attempt by the vast majority of police officers to push the anti-crime agenda. And I think in recent times we have seen some important successes. Only recently, for example, a substantial amount of cocaine was interdicted, meaning, of course, that the cocaine was discovered, and the police force recorded another success in that regard. Rape is a matter that has caused deep distress, as you know. Only this morning I issued a statement expressing my own distress at what occurred in one report, but I know that the police have been working exceedingly hard. I understand, for example, that in respect of the rapes that occurred at Rodney Bay, they had 3 persons in custody. I'm not so sure whether the charges have been laid, but the point is efforts are being made. The vast majority of police officers are very decent people. They're very anxious to do their work. They're very keen to apply the law in the manner that they have been trained to do. But I would accept that there are some police officers who obviously would be distracted by the current events and by concerns about the impacts report. And that's not unreasonable given the circumstances and the issues posed by that impacts report.
Okay, with the police force, the impacts report was a major blow. And what do you think will be the next step for the department? What should be the next step for the department?
What department are you referring to?
The police force, sorry. The former commissioner, Vernon Fessoir, is not going to return.
Well, he's retired, yes.
He's retired.
Sure.
How does the force move forward, from that?
Okay, I think there are 2 issues. First of all, the leadership of the police force requires consolidation. It is vital that the leadership of the police force is defined. And as you know, with the retirement of the former Commissioner Vernon Francois, the Governor of St. Lucia has advertised the post of Commissioner of Police. And I'm hoping that once the process is concluded by the Public Service Commission, who has jurisdiction and authority to recommend the appointment of a police commissioner, that we can bring some stability to the leadership. The police force requires stability at the upper echelons of the administration of the force. That is critical, that is crucial, because you can't consolidate leadership just at the lower levels. It's a fundamental requirement that the leadership at the upper end is stabilized, the leadership at the hierarchy is stabilized. So that's number one. The second thing is that the police force has to continue to manage the impact of the report on the so-called extrajudicial killings. And this, of course, means that they have to prepare for the outcome of the decision of the Director of Public Prosecutions. I'm aware that efforts have been made to handle those issues internally, and part of the process, of course, will require the police to come to terms with what occurred, and at the same time to adjust their procedures as they engage in seeking to resolve the burning problems of crime in the country. But let's not forget that despite the impacts report, quite recently the Acting Commissioner of Police made available the quarterly report on crime, and we have seen some downward movements. Of course, the alarming statistic continues to be rape, and that we have to, incidents of rape, and that we have to tackle vigorously, because this one is not just a matter of security, but this one is also a social problem in terms of how families are handling incidents of sexual offenses within homes and within communities. But I think overall that we have seen some effort by the police, but ultimately the police require stability. You have to bear in mind that the Royal St. Lucia Police Force has gone through crises before. In fact, if you check back into the history of the police force, even colonial times, running through the administration led by Sir John Compton, you've had problems with the police force. I mean, you recall at one time under the leadership of Sir John Compton, Carl Hudson Phillips was brought in to do an investigation and to report on the police, which led to the changes in administration. So I would say that crisis or periodic crisis is not unusual in the Royal St. Lucian Police Force, although what will matter in the long term is that we avoid crisis as much as possible and ensure that we have long-term stability. So for me, the most important thing right now is stability in the leadership of the police force. I'm a great believer in the quality of leadership. If you have sound, good leadership, not just at your upper echelons, at your upper hierarchy, but also right across the police force, some of the problems that exist, I think, can be resolved. So the police force has a great job, however, to restore confidence in the public. I think the public is anxious to have a police force that is responsive, that is receptive, a police force that they can be proud of. And I'm certain that the public in St. Lucia are anxious to assist the police force in its efforts to rebuild and repair its image.
Okay, what would you say is the single most important achievement of the St. Lucia Labour Party?
Well, that's easy. I think we have stabilized this economy. We have helped this economy to recover. At the same time, we have been able to meet so many of the commitments we made to the St. Lucian public prior to the elections in 2011. I mean, some of those spring to mind easily. We said we're going to spend $100 million to create jobs. We have created nice, and we are on course to spend that amount of money. We promised parents that we'd provide $500 to each family that had a child that passed secondary school. We have achieved that. We promised students they would have got laptops. We have achieved that. We promised that we would work assiduously on the health problems to ensure that we have modern hospitals to complete the job that started. We are working. We are doing that. We promised that we would put more money, for example, particularly in youth in the youth sector. I mean, now you drive around this country, you see playing fields looking clean, looking neat. We are providing vital infrastructure. We said that we're going to introduce investment in this country, and you're now beginning to see a return of investment. And this government has had courage to take very strong decisions. A classic one, of course, was a citizenship by investment program. It's not necessarily a program that all St. Lucians feel comfortable about. We are being trusted with the task to commence that program. But the point is that we were able to summon the courage to do so, albeit, of course, by involving too and engaging the opposition in the process. And need I tell you, there have been so many adjustments in the way we govern this country. We have tried to be more responsive. The opposition has been more involved in initiatives with the government of St. Lucia in several respects. And I think if you look at this country now, this is beginning to look good. St. Lucia is beginning to look good. I mean, you have a number of new bridges all around the country. There's no part of this country that you can't go and you can't find new bridges, whether it is in the north with Bois d'Orange, or for that matter, the Albert Bridge in Dennery North. And then, of course, the extraordinary investment we have made in communities with the support from the government of Taiwan. But one of the things that I like about St. Lucia is that we are beginning to look good. A lot of the repairs coming out of the weather systems, the hurricane, and of course the trough, those repairs have been done. And I think we are beginning to look up. Don't get me wrong, we still have monumental problems, and we have to summon the will and courage to deal with those problems. But I think in the short term, we have made real good, solid progress, and this country is once again well poised.
In the wake of the string of rapes,
yes.
Flavia Sherry suggested that mandatory life sentences for rapers, plus naming and identifying them should be done. What do you think? Okay,
two things. First of all, and this is why I brought this, because I had anticipated that question. One second, please. Yes, if you look at Section 123 of our Criminal Code, you may want to take a shot of that, actually. That's why I brought it with me, just to confirm. Section 123 says, I'm reading Section 123, subsection 1. Any person who has sexual intercourse with another without the consent of that other, or without believing that the other's consents to such intercourse, or is reckless as to whether the other person consents or not, commits the offense of rape and is liable on conviction on indictment to imprisonment for life. So what Mrs. Flavia Sherry is asking is in fact in the law, but as you would know, at the end of the day, it is the judge that makes a decision as to the sentence of an offender. and it's not for us to do so. But the law does allow for imprisonment for life. But as I repeat, ultimately it is a decision of the judge. How many years someone will be sentenced in jail for committing an offense of rape. The second point is whether the offenders should be named. That is an issue I know that a lot of persons in the society have championed, but I do think that we do need a mechanism to allow sex offenders to be named, that people do have a sense of who the sex offenders are. One of the things I think that is vital is that the police force develop a database of sex offenders, including, of course, DNA evidence of those individuals. I think that is critical and crucial, not just for purposes of investigation, but to help us to detect the serial rapists, because I do think there are serial rapists in St. Lucia. Not just individuals who commit one offense and that's it, but I think there are individuals who repeatedly commit such offenses, and really they have no place in our communities and in our society except to be behind bars. But as I hinted earlier on, the problem is more complex and deeper than we think. It's not just a security question, but it's also a social question, because there's too much tolerance, particularly in our homes, in our societies, for sexual offenses, and we're not dealing with deviant sexual behavior as we should. So this is not a question of empowering the courts, because the courts have the power through the laws that we have enacted. St. Lucia really has a fairly modern criminal code. The problem is not many people know what's inside that criminal code, and the challenge always is to apply the law.
St. Lucia will be represented at COP12 in Paris in December. What key messages St. Lucia, as a small developing state, will isolate to include in the climate change negotiations?
St. Lucia has a huge responsibility, As you know, the Prime Minister of St. Lucia is the lead Prime Minister for climate change among CARICOM heads of government. That puts us in a very special position, a very unique position, because we have to lead the Caribbean delegation on the issue of climate change. And the Minister of Sustainable Development and the Minister that has responsibility for the sector, the Honorable Dr. Fletcher, has really done a tremendous job. He's earned incredible respect, not just among his CARICOM colleagues, but among developing countries. And throughout the year, and nearly every couple of weeks he's out, because they have requested his expertise, they have requested his help. And in the run-up to the Paris conference, the French government specially invited him not only to be a spokesman for CARICOM, but small island states. I believe he's gone to Paris in the last 2 months on 3 or 4 separate occasions. In fact, he's now coming from Paris. He should be arriving in St. Lucia today after further engagement with the French in preparation for that meeting. It is both an indication of his knowledge and the high esteem in which he is held by the French government, that they should ask him to attend these preparatory meetings. So we have a huge responsibility. Certainly, I will be speaking. I've been invited to address the conference on the 30th of November. I hope to do so. But I will leave the negotiations for Dr. Fletcher, because I will have to return home. I have other matters to attend to. And I think we will be sending out a very clear message to the rest of the world that these small island states are in serious danger, but as much as we are prepared to cooperate with the rest of the world to meet the climate change challenges head on, the rest of the world need to understand that developed countries have a special responsibility to small states, because in the first place, they're the ones who have really caused the problems that we are now experiencing. And so our message will be clear, very consistent, and I believe I gave you a good sense of those messages when I addressed the UN General Assembly on the Sustainable Development Goals a few weeks ago. So our message will be a powerful and very direct message, but carrying forth the agenda of the CARICOM states.
Okay.